Good evening, campers, it's me, Kieran. Today we're going to be talking about Second Foundation, the last of Asimov's Foundation series. It's been a long time coming, but after reviewing Foundation and Empire, we're now ready to see the finale of Second Foundation, where we are finally going to talk about Hari Seldon's far-off distant foundation and why everyone wants to find it. But before we discuss any of that, know that this book was published in 1953, and after a long hiatus, it would take years, over a decade, for Asimov to pen the rest of the Foundation novels. Subjective opinion aside, there is no argument that bookmarking this trilogy with Second Foundation revolutionized the sci-fi game. Foundation as a trilogy is a landmark moment in sci-fi. It truly revolutionized the genre and really put forward the foundation, you're welcome, you can have that for free, of what the tropes, the cliches of space opera that we expect today. However, when you hear space opera, I understand that you might be thinking about Star Wars, and that's quite action-packed. And one thing that has to be said about Foundation in its entirety is that they are very conversation-heavy. They are debate-focused. There's not a lot of action here. Asimov here is really building on his ideas and also the understanding of the planetary system that he has created. The Second Foundation does serve to revisit the planets of Asimov's creations, really tying everything together nicely. Comprised of two stories, this novel focuses on the find for the elusive Second Foundation that we have waited over the last two books to find, to understand what exactly the Second Foundation is and how this fits into Hari Seldon's plan. The first story in Second Foundation revolves around the mule who is trying to locate the whereabouts of the Second Foundation, and we met the mule in the second book in Foundation and Empire. And the second story set more than half a century after the events of the mule trying to find the Second Foundation. We find the first Foundation wanted to find the Second Foundation. So we can see how all these three books get tied up by Second Foundation. Now, the Second Foundation are really elusive. Again, we don't really know anything about them, and what we have to understand is that that's really the point. No one is meant to know about the Second Foundation. We're not meant to know anything because there is a hubbub of psychohistorians. If they are able to keep everything in place, will stop ultimately the end of humanity. Ultimately, humankind are not meant to know anything about the Second Foundation. If we can learn nothing about them, everything's going to go to plan. And that's why the mule is really important, because he is a mutant. He's a mutant who has mind-altering powers that can sway people to his wants, and he decides to find the Second Foundation, that he's going to let one person, a military protege, go untouched by his powers, for fear that under his control he's stifling the opportunity for people to give up information on the Second Foundation. Here's something that has to be said. The Hari Seldon nor the psychohistorians would be able to anticipate the amount of double crossing that go within the mule story to find the Second Foundation. It's somewhat farcical towards the end, but nevertheless, events play out, and the First Foundation now get eyes on the Second Foundation. While these two were created to prevent catastrophe, there's a bit of a conundrum. It is proposed by the technologically advanced First Foundation that the Second Foundation are advanced in terms of society and of psychohistory, remembering that the First Foundation have to rely on Hari Seldon's robot hologram. They fear that the Second Foundation have psychohistory under their grasp. And while these two working together would be beneficial, there is a sense of paranoia within the First Foundation that the Second Foundation could ultimately destroy them. And what we ultimately find in the second story is something that happens in the first story, that the Second Foundation are not exactly what we think they are. Yet to say that there's a nice juxtaposition between the downfall of the mule and the almost betrayal of Arcadia. Now, while some people might want to read this pivotal sci-fi work, some people might be interested in reading them because they're watching Apple's adaptation. Now, as someone who has watched up until, as of recording, the end of season 2, that's all we got at the moment, and someone who's read this trilogy, I have no idea where this TV show is going. They're very different. I'm very lost. Now, for me, one of the talking points of Second Foundation, this theme does eclipse the rest of the novels. If Harry Seldon has predicted everything to a T, and the Second Foundation, in using his work and advancing his work, understand the outcome of everything, is there any free will or autonomy at all throughout the galaxy? And therefore, to some degree, is the Second Foundation to succeed because, as philosopher Tinchy Strider said, it was written in the stars a million miles away? The end of Second Foundation is very satisfying. There is a sense of stability in the air. But this is definitely thought-provoking, because while there is a sense of stability of what the Second Foundation has done, earlier on in the novel, we know that the mule is basically doing the exact same thing, but that feels inherently wrong and unjust. And therefore, is there any real difference between the mule and the Second Foundation in how they influence people? The Foundation trilogy as a whole poses the question of what is better for a society: individual agency or control. I think that's one of the reasons why readers wanted Asimov to continue this series, of which he did, but it took a very long time for him to understand how to begin that journey, and also why these books have maintained their legacy and status. But as we individually review books here, I have to say that Second Foundation, it's the best book within the trilogy, but you do have to read the previous two to understand what's going on here. You can't just jump into this, you have to do the groundwork before. But in saying that, it's very much an Asimov novel. It's not the most well written. There's a lot of boring, grey, beige conversation throughout this. So I'd give it a 5 out of 10. It's bearable. It's more bearable than the other ones. But despite finding these pretty much milquetoast from beginning to end, there has to be something said. Asimov revolutionised science fiction. And if it takes 3 bad books to really pioneer a genre, then I don't think it's 3 bad books. Despite what you think about the Foundation trilogy, you should be thankful for it.